Apologies for disrupting the meeting late. The traffic status of the Washington-Baltimore metro area is really epic. I've been on the road since 3:15. Wow. Great to see you guys. So I lead healthcare and life sciences for an organization called Consensus, spelled with a Y, speaking of blockchain. Consensus is one of the, we have two convenient props handy for you today for visual aids.
And Lacey, pick it up again. This Joe would like this. Joe Liew is the guy who is going to be very happy.
Consensus also is well known for a wide range of other Chotskys and swag. So if you know, that's important to keep in mind. But Consensus is the largest pure play blockchain company, about 1,000 employees operating in 20 countries, building the core infrastructure of enterprise applications that run on top of the Ethereum protocol. In addition to my role leading healthcare and life sciences at Consensus, I chair a standards development working group at IEEE at the intersection of blockchain, AI, healthcare, and life sciences. And I also chair the Healthcare Special Interest Group at the EEA, the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and I'm the co-chair of the Blockchain Task Force at the Health Information Management Systems Society, or HIMSS. Delighted to be here with you and excited for this conversation.
So I want to ask a couple of questions in regards to healthcare blockchains, because clearly there's a lot of healthcare records, right? And obviously, I've been to the doctor a couple of times, and I have no idea what my healthcare records are. I have no idea if I can even access them, and I don't even know who owns them. Does the doctor own them? Is the insurance company? Do I own them? Right? So one of the questions I have, clearly there's a problem here. In the United States, clearly the incumbents are very, very powerful, like Epic, for example, right? And even Hopkins to an extent, but the other sort of institutions that provide healthcare services in the ecosystem, right? And I've seen some startups try to use the blockchains in order to store the healthcare records on there, but I don't feel that they have enough sort of leverage on these huge incumbents. So my question to you guys is, will this type of revolution start somewhere outside the United States, right? We're in a developing country where there's less sort of incumbents, possibly less regulations and less silos in order to do this. One of you guys, I know some of you travel the world, and you guys see a lot of different things. What are your views? What do you think about that? Is it going to be something that happens in emerging markets before it happens in the US or developed countries? And I'll just leave it open, there's no correct answers, but you will be graded on your answer. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think last week Pakistan was one of the countries that had a big kind of plug, and they're using like 4 or 5 groups, and I think they're going to do it like institutionally across the government. And so I think you do it that way, it's a little bit easier because you're basically controlling the ID part of it. But I think that's kind of what I think smaller countries are going to have it a little bit easier because they're going to have less records to aggregate and less records to deal with. I think the example I would use is last year, like I said, I worked with a group that's imploded, which happens. And one of the things they were trying to do was they were trying to figure out a way to grab the claims process. And so part of that was one of the roadblocks was the identity part, was how do you grab the identity and make sure that you're grabbing that information and then grab everything else. And they imploded for other reasons, but that was the stumbling block, was trying to, logistics is a different language in each company. The ID thing's a different language in each company. And so you have this trying to gather and put data together is very, very difficult. Even for a simple taxonomy it was a nightmare. So I think getting an ID system, in my opinion, is going to be one of the starting blocks, at least for some groups, especially when a lot of them don't want to share. Sure. But then figuring out what those required data points are going to be that they're going to start with, and then do they want to share the records from the past? So I think I'll leave it at that. Let's see if I open the book, can of worms or not.
Okay, so there's just a lot of rich fodder there between the identity mention, the dynamic of how is this going to be deployed internationally versus domestically. I'll add to the Pakistan reference that you've had with Mongolia, for example, who has a large-scale blockchain-based initiative to be the first country to eradicate Hep C. And it is it's run through colleagues that are extraordinary folks, and they have a strategy that is oriented around getting to market anywhere where I don't necessarily know that it is so much purely the better regulatory environment. I think the broader issue is the sunk investment in the current state infrastructure. So much like if you would look at what happened with the nation of India and telephones, they never implemented the plain old phone system, the plain old telephone system. They went straight to cell towers, and nobody was ever, no one was ever wired for our old phone system. So there were no entrenched parties who stood to lose mature, stable, long-running business models as a result of that adoption. So rather than highlighting other implementations that are going on around the world, and there are those, I think I would highlight the degree to which it's about to change here in the United States market. So we have two major regulatory forcing functions that are occurring in the relatively short term. One of those is the implementation of the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement, or TEFCA, and the other is the final stage of implementation of the 21st Century Cures Act, which does something really interesting. You guys are used to signing all those HIPAA release forms, right? And you know that if your provider organization is found to be non-compliant with HIPAA or the Privacy Act or any of the attendant laws, high tech, there are 7-figure fines per patient, per instance associated with HIPAA. And for those of us old enough to remember when HIPAA was implemented in the US, what a massive about face it was once there were punishing legal fines and a very, very hard regulatory forcing function around a particular behavior. I mean, it changed totally. Well, if you understand about privacy violation and the way it's investigated and enforced under HIPAA, they are following the exact same model for a brand new illegal action called data blocking. And to Dr. Liew's earlier point about the entrenched interests defending their turf, the technology infrastructure providers have certain interests, like the Epics or the Cerners of the world. It's often overlooked that health systems are directly competitors with one another here in the United States. And health systems have entire wings of business people and strategists whose job it is to prevent what they refer to as patient leakage, meaning stopping a patient who's getting some portion of their care in system from getting some portion of their care with a competitor. It is a major competitive advantage to be able to create lock-in and enclosed systems within healthcare delivery. It's core to the business model. So even more so than the technology infrastructure, the companies like Epic or Cerner, they don't own one bit of data. They own zero data. The provider organizations own it and the patients own it, and depending on what state you're in and whether the moon's in Jupiter, you could clearly assess who owns what, when, and exactly. But so the data blocking will mean that if you cannot, with any standards-based mobile app with no more than 2 clicks, request a subset of your health information and receive it specifically in a certain semantic data format called FHIR, then that organization could be investigated and found to be non-compliant and fined large amounts per patient per instance. That, I predict, is going to create the same kind of massive change in our technology environment that HIPAA did in the 90s. So that was a big, long spiel, but there was a lot to work with.
When is that going to come down the pipeline? That's a regulation that's being voted on now?
So one is a regulation that is happening through the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT, and that's TEFCA, the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. That's for institutional data exchange.
Okay.
The 21st Century Cures Act could be thought of as data exchange for you and me, patient mediated, where patients either mediate the exchange of data or take direct custody of a data element. That's a law that was passed during the second Obama administration and is now in the last stage of its implementation. And it'll be a totally different data governance, privacy, and patient empowerment. It'll also be potentially extremely chaotic and risky too.
I am not a blockchain expert. but I'm a lawyer, so I'm always.
Nobody is a blockchain expert.
No one is.
But as an attorney, you know, as an attorney in ethicist and looking at it from, you know, what attorneys, what we're good at is like, you know, finding everything that could possibly go wrong in any kind of exchange, in any kind of system that's out there. And if you think you have it, just come see me because I'll tell you every reason why you don't. And that makes me a negative person. I'm working on that. But nonetheless, you know, one of the things that comes up, I think, frequently in the context of blockchain generally and in healthcare in particular is the issue of cybersecurity. And so there's two sides. I mean, there's cybersecurity, and then there's also the corresponding issue of, well, you know, cybersecurity, and there's also garbage in, garbage out. So I think one of the challenges that we face when we're looking at those kinds of implementations, we're talking about it in, as you mentioned, in the context of smaller countries where you have fewer populations with less infrastructure, fewer populations with less infrastructure, and that includes legal recourse. We are in a country, in the U.S. in particular, and then secondarily when we look at Western Europe, where we enforce our rights about everything. So I don't like what you're wearing today, and it upsets me, and I'm going to take you to court, so you can never wear that again. And so if you look at my data in any remote way, it's about, you know, we have a very litigious universe, and I'm not complaining about that, but that's where we're going to find a lot of these issues. And, you know, Heather, you mentioned, you know, the implementation of HIPAA. Yeah, like I know we're all like that, people of that age that know when that got implemented. And we look at HIPAA enforcement now, HIPAA high-tech privacy rule enforcement, and there are high potential penalties, but in the same breath, they're not necessarily required to be there with their teeth. And so HIPAA, compared to like GDPR in Europe now, you know, GDPR, when you talk to people about their privacy and where it's going, people will shudder at the thought of GDPR and its implementation, partly because we know that in the US, HIPAA, we see more enforcement actions today than we ever have. But it's kind of, yeah, if we get caught, we might get a slap on the wrist, but, you know, there are some bigger penalties being levied out there. But everybody shudders with GDPR because, you know, I exchange a grocery list with an elderly relative and suddenly I'm out of GDPR compliance and they're going to send me to GDPR jail because it's a very different universe. So we're seeing the awareness increase with states, with CCPA being implemented, and, you know, now with other individual countries, you know, German regs that are just coming online, things like that when it comes to privacy, and what do we do with that when we're trying to look at a system where every little piece, whether it's right, wrong, or different, gets attached to the chain, and it's always there. So I told my husband, I said, you know that permanent record that they talked about when you were bad in kindergarten? Now, that's what it is, it's blockchain. Because it never goes away, that block never goes away. Somewhere else down the line, they'll say, oh, block 3 might have been incorrect, but we're gonna leave it there, and the board will see it. So, I think the question is, for us, particularly in the context of the American structure, how do we balance some of the risks, some of the potential problems of blockchain implementation in a larger universe? And we can sit here and say, well, it might be nice if you're in a real tiny little, you know, in Monaco, where there's only 3 people in Monaco, and compared to here, where the minute something goes wrong, you know it's going to be tied up in the courts, and that's just a legal reality. So I'll stop being negative now.
Okay. I didn't know.
I do. So reacting to that, the principle of data minimization is like this edict philosophically that we should only collect the minimum data that we need and then retain it for the minimum amount of time that we need it and only use it in specifically the way we were authorized to use it. Well, one of the things that's converging with blockchain that's particularly germane to healthcare is a range of new advanced cryptographic methods. And that what those do is allow us to have clinical and business and scientific workflows that flow without actually transmitting or sharing data. So it's a radical conception of the principle of data minimization. So if you are greatly reducing the surface area and the volume of data that has to be transferred around in order to make a workflow flow, that's how these advanced technologies converge with blockchain, and it's one important angle on the whole thing, because it incrementally reduces the total threat area. And then the other is, what do we do? What is supposed to be on-chain versus off-chain in healthcare, and what's the correct architecture for compute and storage? And a general consensus in the healthcare blockchain space is that everyone debates about what level of data to put on a blockchain at all, even metadata is contested. And so it goes from a perspective of 0, including metadata, can be visible and in the clear on a blockchain, to a range of perspectives. But generally, off-chain storage and compute, including with trusted execution and advanced privacy measures, are understood to be the data storage. And it's a little bit easier to get through the GDPR threading of the needle, but only a little bit.
Here's something. I'll be negative too.
Okay.
And look at your earrings, by the way.
They are I wore my blockchain earrings for you guys. No, I
Market though.
It was not my idea. I'm sorry?
Is it really 3D? I can't tell.
It's really 3D.
Yeah.
These are here for a reason. And I have to credit Dr. Ali Lovies at EY, and she actually gave these to me as a gift and wants to start a blockchain healthcare women's cult of some kind involving the humans. And so, anyway.
Yeah, sorry, off topic. So, also to your point, proof of work, proof of stake. If I'm 52% owner or 50%, I can manipulate the data set, the original data set. So keep that in mind that for all intents and purposes, it's not permanent. It should be permanent if it's correct, if everyone agrees to it. But there is a percentage of people that if they dominate the network, can go in and make changes. I mean, we don't, obviously, I don't want to add cybersecurity problems and add to it, but there are ways to adjust and clean, and eventually we'll get to a place where we'll believe that the three of us are trusted and we can make those changes. But yes, it is, it's nightmarish.
I just have to say, though, that that's not an equivalent risk level.
No,
with
no, no,
blockchain
but it
generally.
but it
Depends
can
on
be
the
done.
specific network and the degree to which it's decentralized. So
Yeah,
different
yeah.
networks have different criteria. It's not just blockchain or not.
Okay, so I definitely want to end this panel discussion on a high note, because I don't
Oh, yeah.
now on blockchain. So
Working on
I'll
that
let you guys
anyway.
know that the company that I started, SoCat, So is for Sophie and Cat is for Catherine. Whenever I name a company after myself, it's a total disaster. But after my daughters, it kind of works, so I never say that. We actually went down to the DC, and we launched, according to Booz Allen Hamilton, the first blockchain in the federal government system. And what we were doing there was basically sharing data across 2 organizations or 2 nodes, right? So there's this component of sharing data that works, right? Government has a lot of data, a lot of rich history of data, so it kind of works there. So, my question is, I'm an entrepreneur, and of course I've had my share of failures, especially when launching like ICOs. Oh my goodness, man, what a disaster that was, right? There was actually a doctor from Johns Hopkins, right? Ex-McKinsey, another guy who was early in Bitcoin, so he had money, right? And then they went down to DC and they joined, what was that organization down?
The Chamber of
Chamber of Digital
Commerce.
Commerce. Her name is Carey Warren. This guy paid $25,000 so Professor Liew gets to go to Georgetown and give a talk.
Wow.
Boom, no problem, because he's only in Bitcoins, right? It's like play money to him. The only good news was whenever Congress wrote some kind of, they wrote some kind of white paper on blockchains around DC, our company was in there, right? But we never launched a successful ICO. We could never really raise money. So at the end of the day, everyone else went to different jobs. One of them went to a corporate internal venture. But the point here, And I want to ask you guys on a high note, right? As what have you seen in terms of entrepreneurs having success, right? Not necessarily in medical records, but any type of success in the healthcare space using blockchains. And don't limit yourself just to the US, and it could be even sort of secondhand information. I want to know who's having success, because and I want to end on a high note. And if you tell me which company it is, I will absolutely put it into my blockchain class and invite the entrepreneur to come speak at the class, because we need more, successful entrepreneurs actually implementing this. So,
I got one.
okay, please.
I think it launched early November, Cadena. They're tracking CBD oil via QR code. And so their network started using multi-layer architecture,
Where are they located?
I don't know exactly. I've been following them because they have two coins that are coming out for different purposes. And what I like about them is they now have over 100 nodes that they don't own, that have come off their.
So their network is being supported by
the miners, and so that's the community base. That's pretty big. When you're talking 40 days in, you have 100 nodes that aren't yours. That's a lot of impact. That means people are believing what you're doing, and then they're also on like Cosmos. They're on Polkadot. They're on a lot of. So they're definitely opening themselves up in a way that I think people are going to have to. In examples like this, so I think that's an example. I think it's Cardana, it's KAD something. Cadena, yeah. And so that was interesting because now that comes to the third coin, I think now. I think they had one and now they have two more.
Is this off the Ethereum platform?
No, they're their own.
They're their own. They're using Corda. I think part of it's Corda, but I think there's kind of a manipulation of they're using some kind of hodgepodge, which kind of makes. But I mean, yeah, it's interesting. That one's interesting because of the 100 nodes. That one. I've been following them for that reason. So,
do you have any other tokens? Did you buy any tokens?
No, not yet. I'm thinking about it.
I don't.
Right. So I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are entrepreneurs at the intersection of blockchain and healthcare. And the first one that comes to mind that deserves every bit of recognition is Mr. John Bass, who is the CEO of a company called Hash Health. And Hash Health was an extremely early entrant into the space and has been pragmatic, grounded, consistent, and resilient in their behaviors. They've done both professional services as well as product development. One of their products called ProCredX was a spin out from Hash Health, and ProCredX has developed really strong market access channels through Accenture and other parties. And ProCredX is a really interesting marketplace concept. It's an economic concept around how do you incentivize parties that hold data that assemble into a verifiable provider credential. How do you incentivize them to share that information? And it's not just sharing the information, it's how do you incentivize people who already have information to contribute it. So it's a brilliant crypto-economic play. It's getting momentum. So here to John Bass. And the Hash Health team and the ProCredX team is now an independent entity that spun out of Hash. There is also Rymedy, which is RYMEDY, which is the company I mentioned earlier, that's doing great work all over the world, including some extraordinary traction in Mongolia. There are a range of companies that have gotten traction at the intersection of blockchain and genomics and genomic data security. I definitely want to mention my friend and colleague, Dr. David Kepsel, who's a JD PhD that founded Encryption with an E and was one of the first token launches, and he got the DNA token. How much would you love to have the DNA token, right? And has got, if you were to get your genome sequenced, say 23andMe, you can download your data file, upload it to Encryption. It's been in production for some time. And ultimately, the vision is that a market will be made for consumers to be able to monetize and ethically govern the use of their genomic data. And there's more and more One other comment, though, with respect to entrepreneurship is we have to remember the intrapreneurs as well in the large enterprises in healthcare and life sciences. And it bears mentioning that there are a number, basically the largest healthcare and life sciences organizations in the world, every single one of them is working in blockchain. The Synaptic Health Alliance has brought together United Health Group, Optum, Humana, Quest, Multiplan. IBM's Health Utility Network has Anthem, PNC Bank, Centera, Cleveland Clinic. The Melody Consortia has 16 global pharmaceutical companies. That's looking at blockchain means federated learning, and more. The Coalesce Health Alliance has a bunch of BCBS health plans that came together. There's more. So there's entrepreneurship, there's intrapreneurship, and there are really exciting restructuring of entire value chains actively in progress right now.
Okay, excellent. So you get the last word. Do you believe what your colleagues on this panel are talking about? I mean, from a legal perspective, right? I mean, if you had to sort of forecast into the future about the success of some of these entrepreneurs trying to use blockchains in healthcare, you know, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, there's no doubt that blockchain will have a big place in the context of that care and in the context of the way that, you know, data is held and we presume utilized so that clinical trials can speed up and drugs can, you know, medical products can be developed quicker, and that's all wonderful. I do think that if we think it's going to happen without incident, you know, there's nothing, find something on the planet, anything, that doesn't at some point end up with, you know, coming to see somebody like me. Right? That, you know, of course, there are going to be risks. I mean, that's the nature of the business that we're in, whether it's dealing with blockchain, dealing with a particular product, dealing with almost anything. We face risk every single day.
Lawyers always win.
The what?
The lawyers always win.
That's right. Pay me now or pay me later.
Yeah.
So my wife is a lawyer.
Okay.
She always
Fix it or
That's right. That's a rule, and you're in good company, and you have a support group together. Legal founders and the wives of lawyers.
All right, so I'm going to end the panel discussion. What do you guys do? What are you pitching? So everyone knows, you know, what you guys are doing. Does anybody have a startup? Anybody have a? And then who should come talk to you about what services or goods that you guys are selling or pitching or promoting?
I come here
I have NDAs.
No, go ahead. No. Promote.
Promote.
Yeah. And then we'll call it a day.
I'm working with a group that's doing down your alley, MLA, KYC, compliance, events, blockchain, and Luminous Group. So those are two you can come check out and see. They're doing events for lawyers and for accountants as well. And then everything else I can't, you know, I'm working on a bunch of projects, but yeah, more financial.
And on my side, Consensus Health, which has been operating as a department within Consensus, is presently being restructured. And we're going to be, we have a great deal of things that are presently in stealth mode, and 2020 is going to be a big year. I can give you a couple of quick hints about some of the things that will be released. Those include large-scale infrastructure around value-based agreements and their financial adjudication and settlement against real-world data. And the intersection of blockchain, advanced privacy-preserving things like trust execution environments and zero-knowledge proofs, and federated learning. Who knows what federated learning is? Be honest. Nobody knows. Okay, can I tell them what federated learning is?
No, just make them, no, of course, please.
Okay, just really quick. So if you have a rough sense of how machine learning works, the idea is you bring a bunch of data from wherever you can get it, you put it in a giant data lake, and then you train an algorithm with it, right? Okay. There's all kinds of problems with that outside the scope of this discussion. Federated learning is where you take that concept and turn it upside down. Instead of bringing the data to some place in the middle and training an algorithm, you change the algorithm so it is decentralized, and you send the algorithms to where the data is. And then those algorithms learn on the data all over the place, but all they return is the inferences or findings. So whoever it is that runs that algo, they never see the underlying data. All they know is what you learned. So the intersection of that technology, which was a Google invention about 7 years ago that's never taken off, why? Because it didn't have blockchain. The intersection of that and the technical integration of federated learning with advanced privacy is our major technical focus area. So we are looking at those things and we are doing a lot with that tool set.
Okay, Jen, come on.
So actually, for me personally, I serve as a fractional general counsel for a lot of startups. So, and my primary client right now is a biorisk management company. It's around biosciences, and so we help companies to manage the biorisk that they have, whether it's taking care of things internally, and so that they don't go out, and also from the cybersecurity standpoint, so that data that's held, nasty things don't come inward. And so that's what I do. So if you have a startup that's looking for a general counsel on a part-time basis, that would be me.
Absolutely. So let's give everybody a round of applause. Thank you very much.